Welcome to Shielded, the podcast dedicated to helping Florida's first responders understand the laws that affect their work and their lives. We bring clear answers, practical tips, and stories to help you when you need it most. If you're a first responder in Florida, this is your playbook. Be sure to check out all of our resources at bichlerlaw.com. I'm your host, Paolo Longo, and I'm here with my partner, Geoff Bichler. At Bichler Longo, this is what we do. Now let's get into it. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the show. Today we have a special guest. I'm very, very excited to introduce you to our guest. He is not only a client, he is not only a retired law enforcement officer with more than 25 years of experience under his belt. He is not only a former state of Florida House of Representatives member, including all those things. He's also our friend, Robert Asencio. Welcome, my friend. Thank you for being
Robert.
here. Thank you. I'm grateful for your time today. We've known each other a long time. You have such a unique kind of perspective with your background as a career first responder, with your time in the legislature, understanding the legislative process. And so I'm excited to get in and talk to you about, those perspectives that you have. So again, thank you for being here today. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here with you guys. Boy, it's like going back to school with friends.
That's true, Robert. I mean, we've had a long history of doing a lot of important work together, for sure. So tell us a little bit about, what you're up to now. I mean, we know all the history, all the great history professionally that you had and the experience of the legislature. We talked a little bit about that before we went on camera here, but tell us what you're doing now. Give us a few minutes of update on what's happening.
Yeah, so after 34 years of military, police, and legislative combined service to the state of Florida and our great country, military, police, and legislative again work, I find myself now working with first responders and veterans and producing podcasts, vetsandbadges.com, and a producer of a film that's coming out. It's called Out of the Fire into the Light. And it basically covers the arc of post-traumatic growth, right? Particularly veterans who served in the Second Battle of Ramadi, 15 months of intense combat, day after day after day, of nothing but being shot at and blown up. Can you imagine 15 months enduring that shit?
Yeah.
And surviving. And then, we spent as a country a lot of money training up our warriors. We have the best military service in the world, right? But we do a shitty job of, exiting them out. So here they are, guys that go into the military, after the military, become police officers, different array of work, years-wise. But then they deal with the remnants of trauma, 20 years. So this story is not so much war porn, but it's their conversation of what they experience. And full circle, the work that you guys helped me with, right? Help me deal with my issues of, atrial fib, my heart condition, get me coverage, help them with their PTSD. It covers that. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing now, working with veterans. And I got to tell you, man, it's been very cathartic, training healing. So we have a nonprofit, Healing Corp, and every day we started as a passion project, and now we're crossing the country, working with different people across the country, good people, good brothers and sisters, and people like yourselves, that want to help and do good stuff. So that's what we're doing.
That's really great, Robert. I got to see that movie, and I cannot tell you how impactful that was. Just really, really hit hard. Yeah, all the accolades I can imagine. I mean, you deserve it because it was an extremely emotional thing to watch what these guys had to experience and what they've gone through in the aftermath. With our practice, we see so much post-traumatic stress disorder among first responders anyway. So there certainly is an overlap or a dovetailing, I think, with military service and what we learned through the military, that ultimately became pretty much common that people understand there's an issue there and moving it into this community of first responders. Hats off to you for that work. What is the name of the nonprofit again? So we can just make note of that for our listeners.
Yeah, it's a brand new nonprofit. It's called Healing Corp. And we are a state nonprofit, and we're tied to the Key Biscayne Community Foundation. So the state nonprofit is that state nonprofit. And the Key Biscayne Community Foundation provides us a 501c3 component.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah, and that ties into the, the whole PTSD thing. I mean, obviously, Geoff and I we spend our days working on the legal part, right? Trying to get benefits for our clients. But you kind of have a unique perspective, Robert, because, you spent so much time on the law enforcement side. You have that view. Then you spent years up in Tallahassee, right, as a legislature. So you're looking at that perspective as well. And those things they don't always jive, right? I mean, when you're a captain or you're a coworker on law enforcement and you see those problems coming up, it's a different perspective than when you're up in Tallahassee and people are talking about legislation to try and get this stuff fixed, right?
Yeah, man. So, well, let's break it down to nuts and bolts. Something that you guys and I never really spoke about. So you get people that come into the line of work, right? Whether it's military or first responder work, you go through a regiment of exams, right? You have to be clear of any pre-existing medical conditions, right? You have to have a clean, let's talk about the heart, right? You have to have good functioning heart. You have to be a sound mind, at least past those batteries, psychologicals. Then you're thrown into conditions of work that are putting you in stressful conditions that, let's face it, the everyday person doesn't get to see. And over whether just speak about police and fire. You're put into a 25-30 year career, and you may not go to a shooting every day, but over that 25 to 30 year career, you're seeing it throughout your career repeatedly. What is that? That's compounded trauma. And guess what? Even if you don't see it yourself, you're experiencing it through your colleagues. They see it. You're talking about it. Your experiences are going through chases. I mean, your colleagues are going through chases. You're going to calls. And then you have the complexities of life going through, financial issues. Let's face it, police officers, public servants, we don't earn a lot of money.
Yeah.
Cost of living is expensive. Hey, it's an honorable job and we do it because we love it and we're here to serve. But the reality is we have our own hardships. All that adds up. So it's no wonder that we wind up with emotional and health issues, and at times psychological issues. So here's the deal. The employers, they're ill-equipped and at times resistant or just flatly just don't want to address the fact that these are realities of the job that they don't want to deal with because they're expensive and they don't want to cover. And that's where you guys come in.
Well, you
right?
know what, Robert? Such an important point. Because the culture, we talk about this all the time. The culture is changing, but it hasn't changed. Right. So you go to events and you have the chief of police get up and talk he talks the talk and he walks the walk. And it's like, we're all behind our guys and we want them to have these benefits. And you believe him. He's preaching from the stage, basically. And we've seen this on multiple occasions. But then when a claim is actually made, nobody knows what to do with it. It's immediately denied. You're in litigation. And I think I mentioned this to you before we went on the air with the podcast today. We put these first responders sometimes in positions now where they're fighting their employer for benefits that the statute intends to provide to make the situation better, right? And so it actually ends up compounding the problem and making things so much worse. And, the one other interesting point that you raised, I think is really salient and important. The financial pressure of the job for sure is a factor, and that's part of the job, right? The fact that you guys sacrifice financially in order to serve the communities, and you do it, with love in your heart. Obviously, you want to serve the communities, but it does add to the equation of stressors in the lives of a first responder. So, this is something that we see all the time. Frequently, we end up getting these cases where, they're post-traumatic stress cases, and they come to us because now they're at a crisis point where something has happened in their career. And maybe they're under internal investigation because of, they're drinking on the job or, whatever the case might be. And it's all secondary to the post-traumatic stress disorder. And that is key from my perspective because it's about agencies not recognizing their responsibilities early on. Right. To see that there's a problem,
Absolutely.
there's an issue and intervene. And I wonder, if you agree with that, we certainly love to hear what your thoughts would.
100%. I'm sorry for jumping in because recently we covered what seems to be a common phenomena. And this is where I mentioned this project that I'm working on, this film project. So we premiered the film at Fort Bliss, Texas in January for the year reunion of the Second Battle of Ramadi. And for those of you that are like war movies, if you look at the movie that's Warfare more recently or American Sniper, that puts you in the frame of where this movie is set in Second Battle of Ramadi, Fallujah, Anbar province. We were there with 1,000 combat soldiers. So they were coming to us after the film. And within those people that we have intermingled with and had built a phenomenal relationship after meeting there, some of them have come to us and have told us we were highly recruited, right? Sought after because we are combat veterans for public sector jobs.
Yeah.
And have been chastised because we're peculiar. Our behavior is not according to the employer normal. And let me tell you, as a former, person of rank, a person who was a supervisor of employees in my police department, I know what it is to deal with fellow cops who have been in combat. You put them in a situation that triggers PTS situation or PTS episode, man, you got to know what to look out for, right?
Right.
So these employers who sought them for employment are now really, and in some cases have terminated them and ruined their careers. So financially,
Yeah, and that's so tragic because knowing going in that the person is a vet and may have some issues related to post-traumatic stress or, or any other number of disabilities, through the VA system, right? And then you square them up, you hire the person, and then that very same problem begins to surface again, and you want to either ignore the issue or make it go away by terminating that employee. And so it creates a ton of legal issues. And I mean, obviously, that's our bread and butter, and that's what we have to deal with every day.
Yeah, and Robert, do you think that it's like a systemic institutional thing with employers or do you think it's just that they're putting their heads in the sand really and just not wanting to admit the truth? I mean, because they're obviously failing these people, right? And so you've seen that probably as a captain, right? You see one of your guys that has an issue and, maybe the employer's not, doing the right thing or they just don't know what to do. Maybe they're not intentionally doing anything wrong. Maybe they just don't know what the hell to do.
And I think that honestly, Paolo, I think that's the case more often than not, is that they don't know what to do, right?
Right. And how do you handle that, right? I mean, if you're a person of rank, right? You're a captain or you're a supervisor in an agency and you see some of your guys and gals, right, with these kinds of problems and you see that the employer doesn't know what they're doing. I mean, that's got to be incredibly frustrating, right?
100%. So it's what Geoff said. So there's no one absolute answer to that, right? It's not one answer. I will tell you that if you look at some of the carriers, and you guys know this better than I do, some of the carriers are just,
They deny everything.
Well, the carrier's another topic, right? The carriers know what they're doing. They're just going to deny.
Criminally complicit. Let's go on the record and say they're criminally fucking complicit. Excuse me.
Right.
I
But
love it.
But when you're dealing with the employer, though, that's a different scenario, right? The carriers know what they're doing, right? They do that on purpose. Okay. So that when the carriers do that, then they're going to deal with us, right? But when you're talking about an employer, a chief, a captain, somebody like that, they may just not know what they're doing. They're not going out of their way to bust somebody's chops, right? But the effect is the same essentially, right?
100%. Absolutely. Look, whether they have no balls or they're ignorant, at the end of the day, the end result is probably the same. You're hurting someone, right? So, I like to think that when and I say we because you guys helped me in this, when we established Florida Public Employees, the advocacy group, when we started advocating for over 1 million public sector workers for the Florida retirement system, when the state wanted to collapse our public sector retirement system pension, that we were successful in holding them back and retaining the public sector retirement system that we still have. One of the best retirement systems that public sector pensions in the country, still funded. The way we did it was by putting pressure on the freaking legislators, right? Which one of the reasons
100%.
the legislator decided to run for the legislature.
Right.
So we need to
I remember, I mean, and Robert, that's a really interesting part of our history together,
yeah,
obviously.
that's how we got involved together. And then you guys became my lawyers.
Yeah.
and
Yep,
hey,
that's
and
how we
protected
started.
me.
And that's important, I think, to sort of highlight a little bit, I think, is how the firm works. I mean, we try to affect public policy as much as do the litigation work that we do. And, your group there that we helped you start, the Florida Public Employees Group, really had an enormous impact on the discussions surrounding the pension system in Florida. Most people don't even know that. But that goes back a long time in the history of the firm, and certainly to the beginning of our relationship with you in wanting to affect positive change, for public employees. So, I appreciate you bringing that up very much. But, you saw it early on, and to getting back to the point of, and I think this was so salient again, what you said about these employers love to hire vets as an example, right? And they hire these vets because of the public service and the heart for serving the public and all the good things that we think of when we think of vets. And knowing full well there could be problems associated with that service. But then, there's this disconnect, as I think you suggested earlier, that happens when all of a sudden there's problems with that employee. It may have been predictable, but so often what we see, we get the crisis case when it comes in. Somebody's written up for, some bad behavior on the job, and it turns out it's secondary to mental health issues, and they're about to terminate that person, right? So again, it's just, we always have this thing in our firm, and we believe this very much, that the early intervention is the best thing you can do in these cases because it allows people to get the medical care they need to recover and get back on the job and finish their careers. But too often we have this disconnect where if there is a reason or a basis to move toward termination, they just do it. And they try to get rid of what they think is a problem employee simply because they're now suffering from symptoms or signs of post-traumatic stress that are associated with their work.
Yeah, and I can tell you the overwhelming majority of my clients where we get early intervention, they all stay at work, they all continue to work, and they all finish their careers, right? I mean, those people that we get involved early, they stay. The ones that end up on the, drawing the short stick and losing their jobs are the people that wait and wait and wait and wait. And by the time they've made a complaint, they've been written up, their problems, their IAs, they're having a lot of off the field problems that they're bringing to work with them because they're not getting the help they need. They're not raising their hands. And so, like you mentioned earlier, Geoff, the culture is definitely changing. But Robert, when you started 30 years ago, I mean, anybody that raised their hand and said, "Hey, I need to talk to somebody," right? It was like rub some dirt on it, quit complaining, get back in there, right? But you
Absolutely.
see that that's changed. Have you seen that swing is starting to come a little bit?
Yeah, man, there's always still a stigma, and that's what we're talking about. So, I was on the job 87 days. We were just doing a podcast the other day with somebody who's a little more senior than I am, worked in the city of Miami. His first night on the job, first roll call, leaving roll call. Call goes out of AK-47 shootout. Drug dealers decided to shoot out of Miami. Nothing new, right?
Wow.
Swiss cheese. And my 87 days into my FTO, our FTO field training officer program was 90 days. 3 days shy of being cut off my FTO, ending my FTO program, I run across a subject shooting from a police officer shooting at police officer's car. He shoots at us, so we get involved in our first shootout. Now,
Wow.
we take action and everything. That night, we caught the guy and took care of what we had to do. I didn't realize that the remnants of that night, which was pretty horrific,
That's intense.
because it would bring back the car to the station. After we do the scene scenario, the recreation of the scene, do the investigation, talk to homicide, blah, 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 right? We all have these stories, but the point being is that you continue to go to scenes and you continue to get involved in incidents and you continue to have these high liability, high contact, involved incidents, right? Use of force throughout the years, and you continue to drink and high liability, personal to your life, detriment actions
Right.
year after year. And then you can sit back and you go, I sure made a mess of my life.
Yeah, like three wives later. That's what I mean.
Exactly.
I always joke about
Right.
that, right? It's like how many divorces, right? Yeah.
Two. I mean, one divorce. Thank God I got God has given me a great gem in my current life because she's the best and she understands me. But point being is that the stigma, right? It's okay to seek help. And for those guys that are getting in trouble, if you don't seek help, right? And you have two guys here, And I don't work for this firm. I don't get a dime from you guys, but you guys are there to help because I'm proof positive of it, right? If you don't seek help, you're going to get screwed.
Yeah.
Because it's for employers, it's easier to get rid of officers or first responders, firefighters, whoever. It's easier for them to get rid of you than it is to help you. And that's a reality.
Yeah. And not to mention the physical effects that those things have on you too, right? We just did a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we had a cardiologist on talking about the physical problems, the physical manifestation of the emotional trauma, the PTSD, how that affects causing hypertension, blood pressure, AFib, all those things, right? That
Yeah,
you
the whole
see what's happening.
cardiovascular system is impacted. I mean, the entire cardiovascular system, electrical, all of it.
Do you remember what my heart infraction rate went down to?
Yeah, it was really low, man. It was your ejection fraction. I mean, it was like scary low.
It was 35.
You're right.
I think 30 is like, there's like no return after 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that we're really just beginning to see the connection, the mind-body connection, that the doctors are starting to put this together, even doctors that are working in the workers' compensation arena. So, that podcast that we did with Dr. It was Chernobelsky, it was Dr. Chernobelsky, is really instructive on that point and encourage certainly, Robert, go back and look at that. I think you'll find it very interesting. And for any of the folks who are listening today, I'd also highly recommend going back to that because, you talk about the mental health components in the law, and it's very technical and difficult. But we all understand that these things have an impact on people and beyond just emotional. So now, the physical impact is something that we're starting to deal with more directly as well as we're doing these cases.
You have neuroplasticity, right? The brain rewires itself. So if let's take the PTSD, right? The PTS, because we don't like the D part.
Right.
Hate to say we're disorder,
I agree.
but neuroplasticity. So we rewire based on our habits, based on the environment we're in. And if we're in chaos, we're going to be used to chaos, and our brain is going to expect that. And just like we're adrenaline junkies, we may not have started as adrenaline junkies, but we will be craving it.
Correct.
We don't seek help for it.
Right.
Cortisol.
Right.
Cortisol, those rushes of cortisol, man, they will destroy us. We're looking for that dopamine hit, man. That's why
Yeah, and the cortisol goes with the dopamine,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
you get used to your idle instead of being at 4 or 5, your idle is at 8 or 9, right? So then for you to get to 10, it doesn't take a whole lot, right? Before you're over the edge. And so trying to rewire your brain to get that idle back down to 4 or 5 where it should be, but that takes somebody raising their hand and saying, "Hey, there's a problem here," right? I mean, because if they don't, then their body's going to fail them too, right? And then they end up like you with a 30% injection fraction, and you ain't doing nothing. You're not working until you get the help that you need and
How
get
do you
everything
take care of the problem? Yeah.
right till you fix the problem.
And then you're at home sitting and you're making your life miserable, your family's life miserable because you're miserable and you can't understand what's going on. And the employer's not doing anything for you because let's face it, they have a mission that they have to carry out.
Yeah, and again, that gets to the disconnect of the legal platform that we have to work within. The Chapter 112 benefits, for our first responders, they're so specific on the post-traumatic stress disorder side, and I'm sorry to use the disorder component there, but that's how the law actually addresses this issue. And we've got two components of coverage. One is for simple medical only for mental nervous injuries, which is a very broad umbrella, as you're aware from your time in the legislature. So that's the first component. It's been there since 2007, 2008, where we could always get medical care, but we couldn't get lost wages. And so we passed this bill, and it was 2018 when it passed. And I think you had mentioned you were just out of the legislature during that session. But, we passed this bill, and it's so specific with respect to post-traumatic stress disorder that most cases fail out of the gate. So we end up having to default to the medical only mental nervous injury sort of components of these claims. And that needs to be addressed because it's something that you said early on in our discussion about repetitive trauma, right? Well, most cases of post-traumatic stress and, post-traumatic stress disorder, I want to say that, are related to repetitive trauma. Right. So they're not related to one specific incident. And our law does not cover that. It specifically leaves out the repetitive trauma angle, which is part of the DSM-5. It's part of the diagnostic model. So the fact that we would leave that out of our law is just incomprehensible to me, right? And it's something that we feel like it really needs to be addressed. So we've been pushing, the last year or so. I did a white paper, and our partner Vinny did a Florida Bar Review article that sort of highlights the legal issues, and we're hopeful to get some legislation moving in the next session. So I'll make sure that you get copies of that so you can review that stuff, and maybe you can help us.
Absolutely. Listen, as far as I'm concerned, having been in the legislature, having served behind the badge in uniform, as far as I'm concerned, right now, the way I look at it, everything, when my advocacy is about putting pressure on electeds, right? You guys did something that was very notable and should be replicated by many others. We put pressure on their pockets, right? It's need to get reelected, and it takes money to get them reelected.
Right.
And after, we know that the public loves police officers, loves firefighters, loves first responders. And we need to message to them the importance of doing right by our brothers and sisters.
But yeah, because you have a unique perspective, and it was neat when you were up in Tallahassee, because I got a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, so to speak. But can you just touch on that for a couple of minutes, Robert? When you're up there, when these things come up about first responders, I mean, is it just like business as usual, or what's going on up there?
Yeah, man. Sadly, there's a lot of lip service. Everybody, I don't know any one legislator that will turn their back on taking a picture or shaking a police officer, firefighters, EMS, correction officers, anyone behind a badge or anyone in uniform as a picture, right? They generally want to take the pictures with them.
Oh, sure.
But when it comes to doing the hard work behind the scenes or putting their neck out for them, that's a different story. You have leadership priorities, and you guys have told me about this before I went up there. I went up there with rosy colored glasses, right? So you got to give these people political cover, and I get it. And a lot of times legislators don't have that cover to be able to stand with our first responders. And the other part of this is, let's face it, it costs a lot of money to do the right by our men and women behind uniform or behind the badge. And
that's the least we could do. That's the least we could do. I mean, it costs a lot of money to do all this other stuff that they want to do. Costs a lot of money too. So I don't take that as an answer.
But it's not an answer, but it is the reality, and it doesn't say
it's the reality. Yeah,
so,
right. It's the reality.
We have to remind them how important it is. We have to remind them, and we have to stay united. And the only way to do it is by putting pressure on these guys and gals who are serving in elected position. And you know what? We can do that, because you know what? Without the men and women who serve, what do we have?
We don't have. You're not going to hear any.
You're not going to get any You're not going to get any pushback from us, Robert, because Geoff and I, man, that's all we want to do is pressure these. That's all we do.
That's right? all we do.
All we do is think up new ways to pressure these guys. So that, you're preaching to the choir here, brother.
And honestly, you guys are worth. Look, here I am. It's going to sound freaking weird for the people that know me to hear this. You guys are worth the money that you guys are paid, the money that you guys are earned, the money that you guys earn. Not necessarily all attorneys are worth the money that they earn, right? And the money, the fees that they pay, that they charge. Yeah. But you guys are doing a service to provide the benefits that our brothers and sisters are due.
Well, I'll tell you something, Robert. Yeah, and honestly, that you hit on a sore topic for me, because the reality is, Paolo and I and any of the attorneys in my firm could make a lot more money doing something else. Right? If we went into personal injury work, or we could make a lot more money than we make doing what we do. But we do what we do because of our commitment to this community, and our love of this community, and the fact that they're public servants is really what drives us to the office.
Well, and all Geoff keeps telling me for the 100 years that I've known him is we're just trying to put ourselves out of business, right? Because if the legislature would just pass these laws and the carriers would do what they were supposed to do to protect our first responder community, right?
They wouldn't need us.
We'd be drafting wills for a living, right? But the fact that we get call after call after call after call all day long from first responders who are getting hosed by the system, I think is a testament to the changes that we have to make, right? I mean, it's unbelievable.
So how do you guys get treated for your PTSD, compounded trauma?
What's
how do we get treated, right? Because Geoff and I have PTSD from listening to all the PTSD.
Listen, Robert, I'm halfway gone, brother. I'm telling you right now.
I'm right behind him.
I
I'm right
mean,
behind him.
the stories that I have to hear and the stuff that I have to see with these folks that are suffering unnecessarily in this system. And, there is a sort of weird secondary trauma that comes along with hearing the story of, this person's events, because we have to go into detail. Well, this dead baby call that we went on, or this homicide, or this teen suicide hanging, and, all of this stuff. And we're right there with our clients when they're talking about these extremely emotional events, and they're getting emotional. And honestly, if you got a heartbeat, you can't help but get emotional yourself.
Yeah, and how many widows do we have to talk to that, I mean, one is enough, right? One is enough, but it seems like it's too many times when I'm on the phone with a wife whose husband killed himself because he didn't get the care, right? That is unacceptable. I mean, it was a I was doing a speech a few years ago, and there was a statistic that we had lost more first responders to suicide than on the job injuries. And it was the first year that had ever happened. And I was thinking to myself, that is just the craziest statistic that I've ever heard. That we lose one police officer or firefighter or first responder to suicide because they can't get the help they need. That is an institutional failing that is unacceptable on every level.
Truly is, man.
So true.
It's a statistic.
Just getting back to what you had said earlier, Robert, about building political momentum. I think that we build momentum by telling stories, by taking real cases to Tallahassee, where we have real victims who can talk about what they've had to go through. And that was honestly how we got everybody behind that PTSD law in 2018. You say you got to build consensus and you got to build a political capital. Well, that's how that was done in that case. We learned in 2017 that we were not getting traction. So, we went to all the widows that we represented. We started telling stories in Tallahassee. And guess what happened? A bill that was originally, we had a Democratic sponsor, believe it or not, on the House side. And we had a good, solid Republican sponsor on the Senate side. And pretty soon, everybody jumped on that bill. And it became a bipartisan love fest, right?
Yeah, but it took one of our clients, right? I mean, Jerry Reeland, he did a podcast with us, right? He was one of the guys that,
Well, he was one of them. Yeah, he was one of them. He was one of the Pulse guys.
He was one of
we
the
had a whole bunch of, as you recall, Paolo, I mean, we had a whole bunch of widows that went up there and testified too. And you'd have a dry eye in the House. People were crying, senators and House of Representative members on committee, literally crying as these widows were telling their stories. And, and so fine, we passed this bill, but then again, what is the bill? It's not ideal. Right. And so that's where we are now. I think, and I've always said this, Paolo's heard me say it a million times, that they could have, given the political momentum we had in that moment, we could have passed any bill we wanted to pass. We could have passed something much more significant with more teeth, but we settled for something less than we should have gotten. And now here we are 8 years later with a law that is really not workable. So just very interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
That's the genesis of my work right now. Healing through storytelling. That's all we're doing
That's true. Right. That's your movie. I mean, that's what that is all about.
That's the genesis of the entire initiative, right? We created healing for that purpose to tell stories in the context of which they should be told. Now, there is power in sharing people's stories. And I tell you, for as divided as Tallahassee is, I, who was part of the minority party, I witnessed true bipartisan collaboration and wins. I, who was in the minority party, had the most, and we can verify this, the most amount of bills passed through collaboration in my short tenure there, because I don't give a flip about the party. I can't stand the party that I belong to. I can't stand either party. But what I do believe in is the issues.
Right.
And when we find consensus and we can give our colleagues who are elected the cover, and it's the right issue, and we have support, and we build that momentum you're talking about, we can move mountains. And we have moved mountains. We have gotten stuff accomplished. You guys have been right there. And in a couple of them, you guys have been the tip of the spear, i.e. the Florida retirement system. My God, that was monumental. We saved $183 billion, the pension system. Tell me if that's not a feat. what is.
That was a great victory. And, there have been many of them along the way for sure, but it takes a toll and it's difficult work and it shouldn't be this hard. I mean, I think that's really the point. When Paolo jokes that I've always said, hey, I'm trying to put myself out of business before I retire. I mean, that's really how I look at this because these laws are supposed to be self-executing, right? And instead, we end up executing claimants when they make claims, and we really need to do a lot better. And I think just in terms of wrapping up our discussion today, I know we've kind of gone longer than we typically do, Paolo, but I just want to say, Robert, how much I appreciate your commitment to this over all these years through so many different variations of employment from your work as a law enforcement, obviously your service to the country in the armed forces, what you've done as a representative and also with the Florida public employees is just remarkable stuff. So I really want to say thank you for all of those efforts over time. And I just hope you keep doing that great work.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot to me. And you're part of it. You guys are part of it. The last thing I'll say is this, it's not just about the public sector workers, because everything you do, every help you provide the public sector worker by helping them receive their benefits is a direct benefit to the taxpayer, to the economic conditions of our Floridians. So there is a correlation to the benefit of all in the state of Florida. That the politicians will spin it and say it's self-serving to the lawyers or
Right.
the greedy cops or the unions. No,
Right.
man, this is benefits ever. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and Robert,
Thank you, Robert. We're fighting the fight.
thanks so much, Robert. Thank you for your friendship and all your hard work. And we'll see you on down the road, my friend.
All right, brothers. Take
Thanks
care.
very much, Robert.
Thanks for listening to Shielded. At Bichler Longo, this is what we do. We've represented thousands of first responders across the state of Florida. If you need assistance, don't wait. Please reach out. To learn more, head over to bichlerlaw.com or email us at info@bichlerlaw.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Bichler Law. And if you found today's episode to be helpful, please share it with a fellow first responder who might need to hear it. Until next time, stay safe and thank you for all you do.